The BS Report is presented by Subway. Football season is over. Foot-long season is just beginning. For a limited time, get any piled high regular footlong for just $5. Any footlong, just $5. Hurry in, Subway. Eat fresh. Eat fresh. The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
All right, so I need to do a podcast today, and I'm thinking to myself, what friend of mine is probably home right now watching the Big 12 tournament by himself? And then I realized it was our old friend Chuck Klosterman. Let's call him on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline and see what's up. What's happening?
I'm watching the Big 12 tournament.
How is it? How does Kansas State look this year?
Well, I've only seen Kansas State play 3 or 4 times this year. Right now I'm watching, well, this will date the time of the podcast. It's Kansas and Baylor.
Oh, those
right
two
now,
go way back.
Kansas is up 3, so.
Is that your conference? Have you adopted a conference?
Big 12 is my favorite conference for basketball.
Yeah.
SEC is my favorite conference for football. One thing of all the things about you that at times baffle me, the biggest one is how you still seem to honestly believe that pro football and pro basketball are better than college football and college basketball. I find that unfathomable.
Well, you've kind of twisted it around a little bit.
What do you mean? You seem much more interested in pro football and pro basketball than the college games.
But there are specific reasons for that. I never went to a college. People who love college football or college basketball had some sort of fantastic college experience, whether they went to a college or they grew up in a college hotbed or whatever, and that's why they got into it.
Don't you feel like when there's, say, a college game and a pro game on, I'm talking basketball, and you say you're watching the college game and you flip over to the pro game and it doesn't even seem like a game is happening?
Well,
if college kids practiced the way NBA players played, their coaches would kill them.
It's true, but on the other hand, I have a real problem watching college hoops because the quality of just the talent just isn't the same as it is in the NBA. It's guys who are still trying to figure out who they are as players and how they relate to one another.
But it's
so
not
it's just guys jacking up threes, basically.
But it's not it's not so much the level of talent. It's sort of the level of intensity that makes the difference. The
I enjoy
possessions
that.
actually matter.
I'm with you. I love the intensity. I love the crowds. I wish, you compare an NBA crowd to a college crowd, it's not even the same sport. There's no relation between the two. The NBA crowd is basically asleep until the last 5 minutes, prisoners of the Jumbotron. And in college, there's like a real sense of community and that the fans can affect the game.
I just feel like was last year or 2 years ago you went to you wrote about watching like some Sweet 16 games or something.
Yeah.
It's like when the Lopez brothers were playing.
Yeah.
But all you did is talk about how they were going to be as pros.
I know.
I never care. I think it's crazy like when people say criticize Hansbrough because he's not going to be a good pro. I never care about that. I'd rather have guys be good in college.
I guess fundamentally for me, you're talking about guys who are peaking at a level that's lower than the level that is going to be interesting. It's like if I got totally into the AAA baseball playoffs and the fans were better and the players cared more, but still I'm watching AAA baseball. Well, I'm not watching Major League Baseball.
Yeah, but that's not a valid analogy, though.
Why?
Because AAA baseball, single A baseball, double A baseball, all those things they're just steps toward this top game. Okay, they're all they're all interrelated. It's all professional. Where sort of college sports are its own entity, and that while there's an aspect of it that yes, a lot of the best players are going to move on to the professional level. It doesn't only exist as a feeder program for the professional league.
But it kind of does, though.
Oh, not to me.
All these guys are in college now for 1 or 2 years and they're out.
Did you watch the Summit League Championship? North Dakota State won the Summit League Championship. Now, this was the first year. I didn't go to North Dakota State. I went to the University of North Dakota. But still, it's going to be good for tourism, maybe.
Yeah.
This was their first year of eligibility. And they won this tournament. Now, none of those guys are going to play in the NBA. No one they're probably going to play against, except in the opening round of the tournament, is going to play in the NBA. But I don't think that has, to me, there's very little relationship between that game and the NBA. And
I'm with you. Look, I have my whole Friday playing around Holy Cross, playing for the Patriot League title on Friday afternoon. And that's something like I'm into, but that's my school. And if Holy Cross was good every year, I'd be, probably into it a little more if they were on TV more, if I lived there. Like if Holy Cross was 20 minutes from my house, I'd go to probably 15 home games. So I think it all depends on your situation.
You seem like you're a victim of media.
No, stop it.
You do. You're talking like somebody who's sort of been, like the modernity has made you believe that the amount you see something and the amount the media cares dictates how important it is.
Yeah, but how do you explain this? Through college, now I'm going back to elementary school, junior high school, and then college. I loved college as much as I loved pro.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I loved it was because like when I was growing up, I'm a little older than you, but like especially the Big East in the early 80s, mid 80s, like the Big East was actually more exciting than the NBA. And those were guys that stayed in college for 3-4 years, and I felt like I knew them. My biggest problem with college is that these guys they're in and out in 1 year, 2 year. There's never any sort of continuity between the seasons, which is one of the reasons I'm glad Hansbrough stayed. He's like one of the few guys I actually know when I'm going to watch the tournament this year. I know that guy.
I would. It definitely. I thought it was almost better when guys could go straight to the NBA because then they were never even an aspect of the college game at all. Now there's all these weird situations where freshmen play this huge role and disappear. I
agree. So you're agreeing with me?
On that I am, yeah.
I just said, like last year what happened with Derrick Rose and Michael Beasley and O.J. Mayo, and even the year before with Odin and Durant. These are these guys that became the most iconic figures for that particular year, and then they were gone. Whereas, like, when I was growing up, Chris Mullin was at St. John's for 4 years. Patrick Ewing felt like he was at Georgetown for 10 years. And it was like I had opinions on him. How am I supposed to develop an opinion on O.J. Mayo in 20 games?
So is your ultimate argument, though, that it's the level of talent that, to you, that makes the pro game better? The level of talent.
It's a combination of talent and continuity. Because there are guys that play together. Like, look at the Lakers this year. They're in the playoffs last year. They come together. They get Gasol. They kind of evolve into a contender. They almost make the finals. Now they're back. Now Bynum's hurt. They added Ariza. He's basically playing crunch time for them. But they're basically the same team as last year, trying to incorporate the lessons that they had from last year and incorporate those lessons into winning a title. Like, that's why I like basketball. Whereas, like, what do I make of USC this year? It's a totally different team. Yeah, they have Tosh Gibson, but
I don't know. You make a good argument. I just feel, though, that even as you describe why the Lakers are more interesting and there's sort of all this kind of this narrative arc to their team, it's hard to watch a full NBA game. Even in the second and third quarter, it's hard to stay focused sometimes because it seems as though the players themselves are disinterested.
Yeah, but that's partly the NBA's problem because they have too many games. So actually, I was at this. You would have liked this conference. I'm making you go next year. This Sloan Analytical Conference for basically like stats and all different stuff about the fan experience. But one of the things they talked about is whether there are too many games. Where was
this at? This is interesting.
It was at MAT. Oh, it was at MAT. You would have loved it. So one of the things they talked about was the fan experience and where it's going. Because it's my opinion, and I've been writing about this, that with pro sports, like we're really going to see just a debacle in the next couple of years with people not wanting to pay to go to these games and all that stuff. But one of the things we talked about was that the NBA and NHL seasons are just too long, and whether the NBA would be better served by going to a 72-game schedule where the players were more rested, where there was more of a demand for tickets. Because right now, like you live in New York, you could go to any Knicks game you want.
Oh, that's true. Although
you go to any Nets game you want.
The year of the lockout, though, where the season got shortened, that didn't improve things, though.
Well, it didn't improve things for a different reason, though, is because they had basically 2.5 months to play a 50-game season, and half the guys were out of shape. Like there was no training camp; it was just bad. But if you look at the economic model that college has, It's kind of brilliant. They play 30 games in a regular season, and then everything crests in this one tournament where you could be out in one round or you could play 6 rounds. But they make more money for that tournament than the NBA makes, period.
Oh, I mean, this can never happen because you can't change these things this dramatically, but I honestly feel it would be much more interesting if the NBA played a 40-game schedule with a 16-team single-elimination tournament.
Yeah,
I think that would be so fun to watch. I would watch every single playoff game. But, it's this weird thing where the NBA, and it makes sense to a degree, that they feel by having these long series that, the best team, inevitably will win. I do think, though, that it seems to downplay sort of the whole idea of this being a form of entertainment.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's much desire for, like, this quantitative realization of who is the best team in the league every year.
Well, and also, you're talking about when you get to the last 6 weeks of the season, you have 10 or 11 teams that it's in their interest to just lose so they can get a better draft pick. So they got to figure out what to do with that. But, I think personally, if it was my league and I was a commissioner, I would have a 65-game schedule. I would have a mid-season tournament that had some sort of reward at the end, like you're guaranteed a bye through the first round or something. I don't know. But you want to keep people engaged. Like just saying, hey, here's our 82-game season. Like, for instance, the Celtics play 5 games in 7 days. I think it's next week. They have basically, if you look at their calendar, their schedule, they go like Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Like, that's ridiculous. You can't tell me that they're going to be playing the best they could possibly play with that kind of schedule. It's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, that seems to validate my point about the college game, doesn't it? The best team, the team you care most about, you're conceding that there's going to be a stretch of the season where it'll be uninteresting. That will not happen with any major college team down the stretch of their season.
Well, you also, in college, you have rivalries that, because there's so many games, and this really killed the NHL, in my opinion, because when I was growing up, the Bruins had rivals, and now they're playing Columbus and Nashville and, like, teams that they just not could have a history with. But you look at college, UNC plays Duke, it's a big deal. They play twice a year. They might play a third time in the ACC tournament, maybe a fourth time in the NCAA tournament, doubtful. But that's it. And every game feels like it means something. You're like, hey, UNC Duke's on tonight. I got to watch this. I don't know if there's, 4 NBA rivalries like that right now. I think Celtics-Lakers is like that again.
That would be the only one.
Yeah, I think LeBron's kind of interesting.
But it's ephemeral, though. I mean, in 5 years, it won't be anymore. I mean, that's
right.
The thing. The Duke-North Carolina rivalry isn't really dependent on how good the teams are.
No, it has the players don't matter. Like, it's all it is the uniforms and the crowd.
Oh, you mentioned something kind of interesting. You were talking about going to, like, this fans summit or this fans conference and sort of talking about this. And I feel like there's been, in the last 5 years or so, there has sort of been this widespread kind of rediscovery over the import of the fan.
Yeah.
Considering the way that, you write your column and how you've written your column, do you see yourself as an advocate for fandom?
I would hope so.
So it's really interesting. Cause there was that, who Harry Edwards is?
Yeah.
I remember one time he was giving this talk about how he doesn't classify himself as a fan because fan is an abbreviation of fanatic, and he takes sports far too seriously to be a fanatic. And I really agreed with that when I first heard it. I wonder if you, though, so you think that you're supposed to sort of advocate the idea of fandom because to you that is the most important element of the sports experience?
I would say it's the most important element because ultimately the fans pay for everything. And I think teams have lost sight of that over the years, and now they're kind of rediscovering that. Like when I was doing the research for the column I wrote about the economy and how it's affected the NBA, like you see these teams now with these family packages and 2-for-1s and college night, and it's kind of like for whatever reason in 2009 the NBA realized, oh yeah, we got to actually try to get the fans in the building. Yeah, it's like an arrogance, which I don't totally understand. Like, how can you ever be arrogant about a business where you're relying on people to consume your product?
Well, I mean, your column on like the NBA economics, that was really interesting, and I think it's probably pretty accurate. It does seem as though almost baseball more than any other sport, but probably basketball as well, it's the same thing that kind of happened with the whole economy. That sort of became this fictionalized value of things. that we just kind of got used to this system where they're really, the belief that things are worth whatever you pay for them. People really started to believe that, even when it became kind of ludicrous, and it created this, this very kind of fragile, interwoven thing that could, like, if it collapses, I don't know really if it's fixable.
You know what's interesting? I've worked on this basketball book now for 45 years, and
what is the date on it now? I thought at one point it was coming out like this summer.
It's coming out October, same time as your book that moved up. We might have to do a joint book signing.
Oh yeah, that would be fun.
That could be kind of fun, right? You and I next to a table, and then we'll have like a third person.
No table.
Huh?
We can have a table. I was joking. Yeah.
Well, we'll have you and me, and then we'll have some third guy. We'll just pick him at a random, some guy with some random book, and we'll have him there, and people will be confused, and we'll just try to see how many people buy their book.
Will he actually be an author, or will it actually be a random person, like a hobo or something?
I don't know. I have to figure that out. Maybe a homeless person. I like the idea of the joint book signing, though. Maybe we could have, we'll have posters for it where we're facing each other like 80s boxers, like the Hagler Hearns poster. We're staring at each other.
Is it going to specify what our reach is? I'm pretty sure I have longer reach.
Yeah. Oh, longer reach? Whoa, you're deceivingly tall. You seem like one of those guys that...
I never get when people say that, deceivingly tall. What have I written that would give people the impression that I'm short? I don't understand that.
Do other people think that you're probably short?
People say that all the time. I'll do a book reading or something, and inevitably, some of the comments from people is they're surprised that I'm tall. It's not as though I'm like Marathon or something. I'm 6'2".
We're the same height, basically. I get the same, but I get the same.
You're not 6'2".
I'm 6'1.5".
I don't think you're 6'1.5", Bill.
Hey, listen, you can measure me next time I'm with you. I'm 6'1.5", damn it. I'm a deceiving 6'1.5". I am too. I'm 6'1.5".
This is a boring conversation. But anyways, okay, you can get the same thing though.
Yes, I do. Yeah.
We've now had a public argument over who's taller. I think that every criticism about us has just been proven true.
Hey, I'm willing to have a measure off. I don't think you're 6'2". I think you're probably 6'1 1/3.
Well.
Wait, but back to I was telling you about when I was getting the tapes. So I'm watching these crowds from the 70s. Really, really life or death for these fans at the Boston Garden or Madison Square Garden or whatever. And then I don't know if you get MSG in your apartment. Mm-hmm. So MSG will run these old, or they don't right now, but they were doing it last summer. They were running old wrestling cards from the 70s and 80s, back the Bob Backlund era and the Jimmy Snuka and Hulk Hogan. Back when people really cared about wrestling and thought it was real. And the matches themselves were boring as hell. But anytime something exciting happened, people were just beside themselves. There's some sort of upset win. People are deliriously happy. And now you look at games and the games that are happening now, and it's a lot more contained. People, they know when to react, and they react, and then they leave. So I was wondering why that was the case, and I was thinking...
Well, does your affinity for fandom, does it carry over to all things? Do you like bands who have crazier fans? Do you like the Dead more than other bands because their fan base is more intense? Or
well, that's why I was
Drive-In. Do you really like them because their fans were crazy?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you feel like the music crowds nowadays at concerts are as invested in the songs and the music and everything as they were when you were growing up in the 80s? Because I have a whole theory about this, which I'll tell you after.
Well, I might not be the best person to judge. I didn't go to a lot of shows during the 80s because I didn't really have the chance. Then when I started to go into a lot of shows, they were in the position of being, a critic or a journalist or whatever, so I was often not really in with the crazy people. And I don't like being around crazy people, so I would never go there consciously. Are they less intense? Are fans less intense? That usually just has to do with the age demographic of the people. Young people are always going to be crazy.
Well, here's my theory. I think people were more intense back in the 70s because there was less to do. If you're going to wrestling on a Monday night or whatever, probably the highlight of your week. Because what else were you going to do? You had 3 cable channels. You didn't have internet. Like, you look at, like, the movies that were around, like Dazed and Confused, which I love. Like, a Friday night was basically you just got in your car and drive around. Mm-hmm. That's what you did. Because you maybe, like, maybe get stoned behind the convenience store. What else were you going to do? There was nothing to do. So when you went to a Knicks game or a wrestling card or a Peter Frampton concert, it really was the highlight of your week. This was the most exciting moment you were going to have. And now I look at the way kids are, and they're always, kids always have to have their attention taken. They're texting, they're they're answering emails while they're watching TV, all this stuff.
So would you assume then that compared to, say, a Zeppelin show in the 70s, a performance by John Philip Sousa would have even been more nuts? Because they would have even had less at that period. I mean, what you're arguing is that if the amount of media you get sort of takes away your ability to kind of have an emotional, visceral experience with something, it should consistently increase backwards through time because there was always less to do.
No, I think from like 76 going backwards, there really wasn't a lot to do at all. There really wasn't.
Okay, it's all the same. From when did we begin having things to do?
I think right around MTV, I'm going to say 82, all of a sudden people were getting cable. There were more channels. Then, there was better ways to consume music because you had CDs. It was quicker to, you had the Walkmans, stuff like that. You had more magazines. You had stuff.
Well,
there was stuff to do.
That's true. But, I mean, I think it would be very easy to argue that none of those things weren't as dramatic as, say, the advent of radio, where the idea that you could have an experience that wasn't happening in front of you became common. That would have been more jarring, probably, than the introduction of all these other things, right?
People in the 1940s listened to boxing matches on the radio. Name me one person who would do that now.
Well,
nobody's doing that now.
I don't know. This is really no one would. Yes. I mean, I guess if I really cared about a boxing match and I had money on it and I was in a car. Baylor beat Kansas, by the way. I mean, everyone will know that now, but yeah.
When does Baylor stop being the team that had the guy who killed one of his teammates or whatever happened? Every time I hear Baylor, I think of that. Yeah, it's going to be a long time
before people. I mean, basically, if you know enough about college basketball that you know about that, you're not going to forget it.
1981. My dad and I go to the Boston Garden to watch Hearns-Leonard.
Hearns and who?
Hearns and Leonard on closed circuit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now, that's an interesting cutoff date because nowadays, nobody would do that. If I said to you, hey, I'm going to go to the Staples Center tonight and watch this boxing match on a big TV and we're going to pay $40 a piece, you would say, you're crazy. Why don't we just pay-per-view that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think probably says more about the decline of boxing, though. There's just no interest in boxing. And there needs to be dominant heavyweights for casual fans to care.
I agree. Like Tyson comes out now, and
like this Ultimate Fighting has had an impact, obviously, because it sort of seems to be kind of a sponge for all the people who are only interested in the most violent aspects of boxing or even hockey or whatever. The people who are really just watching it for that, the kind of people who watch NASCAR for accidents, they've all migrated to Ultimate Fighting. So that part of the audience is gone.
Well, you wouldn't say that part of it is because with Ultimate Fighting, you're guaranteed a good card. If the main event isn't that good, you still might get 3 other good fights, whereas in real boxing, it's all or nothing with the main event.
Well, probably, I guess, but it's more, I feel like the difference between Ultimate Fighting and boxing is greater than most people. Like, we're having it part of the same conversation. Usually when you talk about these things, you talk about them together. But I do feel like they're probably more different than we think. I mean, I think it was Tony Kornheiser or something said this once, and it was kind of true. It's very true. In boxing, you can win by not getting hit. You can win a fight basically by avoiding the contact. That does not seem to be an aspect of Ultimate Fighting.
Yes.
There's nobody who's sort of like the sly guy in Ultimate Fighting.
Ultimate Fighting fits in more with the kind of culture we have now. Because it's...
Well, you have a very dark view of culture, don't you, Bill?
Well, no, it's more like it's quick hits, it's highlights. Like, you can watch a whole boxing match and watch the highlights and, nothing really interesting happens. In UFC, Yeah, if you go into like, I was in Best Buy walking around yesterday. There's like a whole shelf of UFC greatest knockouts, greatest submissions, like all these different DVDs. I just don't know if you could really do that with boxing. You could do it, but the boxers would be bad for the most part. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like a collection of modern boxers, the best knockouts of the last 3 years.
Yeah, there'd be like 20.
Yeah, I wouldn't be very interested in watching.
And Tommy Hearns would be involved with like 5 of them. But, yeah, the UFC thing, I wrote about it too. It was like 2002 and saw somebody just his face got really messed up, and it was, I don't know, it's disturbing. It went kind of beyond what I was prepared for. So I haven't gone back, but now I think I'm ready to go back. I don't know. Have you been?
No, I don't.
Any desire?
I'm totally a dilettante. I'm not that interested, I guess. But, you know, I guess if sometimes when I'm flipping around channels, I'll see, I think they showed it on the high definition channel here or something.
Yeah.
And I'll watch it a little bit, but I'm not. I mean, I was even sort of a kind of a moderate boxing fan, so I mean, you know.
I think college basketball is the perfect sport for you because you don't have to root for a team. You could just jump on whatever bandwagon you want to, and things change every year. There's no correlation to last year. For a sports atheist like yourself, it's the perfect view.
College football is definitely the best sport. There's no question about that. College
football can't get decided, though. It has no resolution. It's just basically arbitrary.
That's better.
Oh, you like that more as the sports atheist?
Well, I mean, that's, you know, it's, the thing is, I think we've probably talked about this before, and, like, to me, that this overwhelming. We talked about this the last time we did this podcast, I guess. Like this overwhelming desire people have for a playoff system because they feel, well, you know, we don't really know. It's not really decided. I mean, isn't that basically the most interesting conversation to have about sports? Is who's actually the best college team in the country? Because we'll never actually know. And even if we had a playoff, we wouldn't really know. We'd know who won the series of games at the end. That wouldn't necessarily dictate they were the best team. I like the way it is.
Interesting. So if the NBA went to that, you would be on board or not on board?
If the NBA dropped the playoffs and it was...
No, they just did the conferences, and then we had to kind of guess who would have won the finals. It went through all the way to the Eastern Western Finals.
Well, I
think the Lakers
people would talk about the NBA much more than they do.
Yeah. So what would you change about the NBA if you could?
What would I change about the NBA if I could? Oh, that's an interesting question. Well,
would you have marijuana testing?
Why?
Would you encourage marijuana use?
Do you think that's a problem in the NBA right now?
Oh, I think it's been a problem since the early 90s.
How? If there's anybody who can smoke pot, it's an NBA player. Why would he how could it possibly hurt him? He's a 6'8" guy, right? So he can't go out at bars after the game unless he's going to get bothered by everyone's there. So he's going to stay in his hotel room. He can eat whatever he wants because he's burning a ton of calories all the time. He doesn't need a lot of short-term memory. He mainly is going to just sit around a lot and watch television in a hotel room. I do not see how can there be any downside to an NBA player smoking pot.
There's one downside.
What? He might get arrested. That's it.
Well, there's two downsides, actually. One is that they're going to eat more late at night. It's bad for them physically. And then two, it makes them like about a third of a step slower, in my opinion.
Now, what is who are you using as your example?
I'm using it as a couple of players I know who got off it and then told friends that I happen to know that they wish they had done it 3-4 years before.
Okay, well, first of all, the idea that they're going to gain weight because they're eating a lot at night. They're going to eat after the game anyways. Okay, they're going to go back and eat. Okay,
but they're not going to have like 5 bags of Sour Patch Kids, though.
Anybody who quits anything is going to tell you it was a good move because they need to validate in their mind that they made the right decision. Everybody who quits drinking tells you that it was, it's changed their life, that they wish they'd done it earlier, and then they kind of look back and they exaggerate how much they used to drink. People who are on drugs are the same way. People who quit drugs immediately tell you how much it's improved their life, and sometimes it has and sometimes it hasn't. But if you're going to quit and you're going to give up something you like, you sort of have to be conscious or make yourself conscious of this fact that it's improved your life. So, I mean, these guys who say it improved their life, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. Maybe they need to say that to feel comfortable.
There has to be examples of people who quit something but miss the fact that whatever they quit.
This is especially true with musicians, but you see it a lot with athletes too. They go through a period of their life where, they sleep with lots of people. Then they get into a serious relationship and they stop doing that. And what they always say, they say, I realize that if you have sex with 1,000 women, you're having the same experience 1,000 times. But it's much more interesting to be with one person all the time. But of course you're going to say that.
Yeah,
and if you give any person that option, if any single guy has that option, he'll always choose the one that the so-called expert has just said was a mistake.
Yeah. Well, one of my New Year's resolution was not to have any more cigarettes when I'm out drinking.
Okay.
So I always end up getting roped into one or two. And, I did that for, I've got kids. I want to make sure, even though I'm not smoking nearly enough to get whatever. But, even the one or two, it's like, I got to stop doing this. Don't think I don't miss it, though. I love it. I loved having a cig. To me, nothing was better than going outside a bar and having a cig with somebody and talking to them for 10
maybe
minutes.
you were like one of these Gladwellian chippers. Like
what does that mean?
Tipping Point, where he talks about how there's a certain kind of person who can smoke 5 or less cigarettes every other day without becoming addicted.
Well,
and all the attempts to basically stop people from smoking entirely really only affected people who were like the casual consumer.
Yeah. Did you ever think we'd get to a day where you could not even smoke in a bar in New York City?
No, I'm very surprised by that. But it totally worked, and almost everybody's happy about it.
Yeah, because I was watching Midnight Run, and at one point, Marvin is buying a plane ticket near the end in the Vegas airport, and he says he's smoking a cigarette, and the guy's like, do you want smoking or non-smoking? And the guy's like, what do you think? But I was thinking that was only 20 years ago we allowed smoking on airplanes.
Yeah, I know.
It's bizarre.
Was it even, it might have been more than 20 at this, because that would have been what? That would have been...
Well, it came out in 1988, that movie.
Huh.
Yeah, so 21 years ago.
Yeah, I was never, by the time I didn't fly in an airplane until 1990, so I guess I had not experienced the smoking world of flight.
It's so weird. I remember taking the Amtrak to see my dad from Connecticut, and they'd have the one smoking car. Well, actually, they'd probably have two. But you'd be walking through the smoking car trying to get to another car to find a seat, and in that, 3 minutes, you would just stink of nicotine, and you'd get a headache. Just from walking through the smoking car. But now they've probably eliminated that, too.
Well, when I started working in newspapers, they had just sort of ended that period where you could smoke in the newsroom. And apparently that there would just be sections of every newsroom that were just blue. They look like images from Mad Men, sort of. Like everything was blue,
I always thought it was interesting, and I remember working at the Herald, the people who would go outside to smoke, and they would do it once an hour. But it wasn't like you weren't going right outside the door to smoke. You had to take an elevator downstairs. It was probably a 6-minute round trip plus the 7 minutes you smoked. So every hour they were getting a 15-minute break. And if that doesn't tell you one of the reasons why newspapers are going under, I don't know what does. But
smoking? You think their desire to smoke is what did it?
No, it's just that was the mentality of newspapers. And that is, hey, I'm going to have a smoke. I'll be back in 15 minutes. And then you do it again an hour later. Hold on. This is Bill talking after the podcast. So that tangent about people smoking in newspapers led to Chuck and I arguing about newspapers versus the Internet for the next basically 45 minutes. And we decided we're going to make that its own podcast. So you'll have to come back for that one. Part 2. Me and Chuck Klosterman. Gets a little heated at times. Feisty. I think we would have to have been separated by the refs if we were in the same room. Anyway, stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening to the BS Report.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
And that concludes another episode of the BS Report. And here's 55 more words that Bill Simmons intended to mention, but unfortunately ran out of time. Now you can get any regular piled high Subway footlong for just $5. The keyword is any. The sweet onion chicken teriyaki, savory chicken and bacon ranch, the meaty taste bud pleasing Italian BMT. All the regular famous Subway footlongs, just $5. Subway, eat fresh. See store for details.